So, Mike, besides listening to every episode of the Frictionless Experience, how do you keep up with what's going on in the industry and stay abreast of current trends?
Yeah, so on the it's a whole lot of reading. I'm very much a reader and a podcast listener now. No, I'm just kidding. I've always been a podcast listener. Uh, so for me, I do tend to focus a little bit more on the technology and the performance side. And one of the best resources for me, honestly, Google came out with their Core Web Vitals over the last three or so years, and there's a lot of body of work over the importance of those and kind of how can you optimize your site to those metrics. So I spend a lot of time in reading in and up on that and ensuring like are the technologies that we use are they helping us from like the CLS and LCP perspective? Are they hurting us? So a lot of time spent there, and then just tech blogging in general is something where I live in terms of understanding what's going on in the industry.
I don't know if it was a blessing or a curse, but Google adding SEO as a consideration with Core Web Vitals helps to create better experiences on websites, but then it also punishes those that don't necessarily have it, and they'll probably slap my wrist for saying punish because it's rewarding those for doing well is how they want to say that. But as you're going through with Core Web Vitals, what I find is very cool is it's pretty much the first time that we've been able to quantify the user experience because the interactivity of FID/INP matters a lot. The stability of the site matters a lot. Those two metrics don't actually exist on the timescale that we would typically consider as like the milestones of like,
Yeah,
okay, you have DOM interactive, then you have on load, then you have timed interactive, then you have fully rendered or whatever. Like all these different metrics that used to exist as like a timescale of from start to finish. These exist outside of that, and that's a UX metric. That's not a performance metric, yet we can quantify it as a performance metric, and that's what helps us to make sure that we're doing right for our customers. Now, I've ignored LCP. LCP does exist on that, large significant paint does exist on that time scale, but you combine all three of those together. Um, it's kind of a nice little silver bullet for us to just make sure that we have a stable experience.
yeah, and I'll tangent on that a little bit. I do think this is actually with the Core Web Vitals, it's the first time we had measurements that actually truly reflected user experience. Like in the
Exactly.
past, we would look at page load time and you can cheat. Like you can cheat really, really well on metrics like that, but you can't cheat around tricking people into thinking your site's not shifting around the cumulative
Right.
layout shift when it actually is. Like you can't fake that. You can't fake when does the most important piece or largest piece of content show up on your site. So I it did definitely raise the bar for what you needed to do to be successful from a user experience and perform to an extent performance perspective. But I think at the same time, it actually set a clearly understood bar that
Right.
where you knew if you met it, you're actually truly making a difference for your users.
Yeah, and we also find a lot of business users latch onto it because it's easier to understand what it means and why because it's not literally tangible. You can't go out and grab a website with your hands. I guess you could touch a screen, but it just makes sense, right? Like the interactivity, the stability, and the moment where users think you should be interacting, right? That's the
Yeah,
three key aspects. It's really a nice little trinity.
yeah, yeah. And tie this back to seasonality a little bit. Those are things depending on what you are doing from a load testing perspective. You actually can measure those as a part of your load test as well. So again, the way that we do it is we're actually when we do that end-to-end test of just the full slickdeals.net site, we are actually pushing all of this load into production. So uh, it is actually impacting our users. So we can go back and see in real time, like what, as we're running this load test and throwing an additional 40,000 users or whatever the number is that we choose into this site, how are our real users that are all still interacting with that same site? How is their LCP being impacted? How is their that's usually the one that'll move one way or the other, right?
Right.
But sometimes I actually saw a CLS issue that was the result of a kind of like a race condition. So it was actually the first time that I'd seen CLS. Actually, it was impacted because of a slow connection. Like if somebody had a really fast connection to the site, they didn't experience the CLS because of the order of our JavaScript and how that ran.
Was a user with a slower connection, aka somebody on mobile, it actually did have that CLS issue. So you'll discover really interesting things depending on what you are looking at from a telemetry perspective as you're running those load tests, preparing for the high seasonal traffic.
I like that term, Nick, the holy trinity of frictionless experiences. Core Web Vitals.
Yep, it'll work. It'll work, and then we can get into get the microscope out, the vital scope out to get into the depths of it.
I like it.
Right into all your buzzwords as usual.
I'm sure Adam's taking notes right now. So, Mike, what's one final thought that you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it's to care about seasonality through the whole year, right? Don't wait until you're a month out from the traffic coming to ensure that your site is able to handle that traffic. On the business and product side, in my experience, they are thinking about this stuff all the time. And from the technology side of things, we should have that same rigor around the performance and scale aspect of seasonality as well.
That's a great point to leave us on. So thanks for a great conversation, Mike.